It's October, and I know a lot of you artists are participating in the Inktober challenge, so I wanted to give some advice to help you guys out. Some inking techniques. We're going to talk about inking fur today, and what better subject to do that than the Wolfman. Greetings everyone, welcome to the Underground Lair. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. I'm a professional illustrator, designer, and mad creator because you know what? You have to be a little crazy to do this thing called art. And things get a little crazy. It's October, it's Inktober, it's sort of the Halloween season, and things can get a little crazy, a little maddening. So I just want to throw out some tips for you guys to help you out with Inktober if you're participating. And even if you're not, or if you're watching this later and it's not October, doesn't matter. These tips are going to work pretty much the whole year round if you are an artist who likes to work with ink. So I got some suggestions. People wanted me to go into how to ink different textures. And one of the textures that a lot of people want to learn how to do is how to ink fur. And there's a number of ways to do that. We're going to play around with some different tools, see what different effects we can get with the different tools, and just experiment and find out some different ways of inking. I'll give you some tips along the way. But in order to do that, I have picked out this drawing here. I don't know if you can see it. It is the Wolfman, kind of my take on the classic Universal Studios monster Wolfman. I'm going to be doing a lot of these as we go through this month. We already did the Frankenstein. But we're going to do the Wolfman. We're going to try some different inking techniques. So without any further delay, let's get to it. Alright, so knowing that I was going to be doing some inking videos for the month of October, I put the call out, and one of the biggest requests I got was, as far as different textures to do, was fur. So that's going to be the first one that I'm going to tackle, and what better subject to tackle that on than the Wolfman, especially since this is October, and I'm going to try to stick to some monsters, primarily Universal Studios, classic monsters, but give the different spin on it. So I did this drawing on my Patreon, so if you want to check out me doing the actual penciling of this, the digital penciling, you can check that out on my Patreon. But I printed it out and I'm going to use this to ink. But before I get to that, I have some techniques that I want to go over, and it's really unusual because like I said, I did get requests to do how to render fur in ink in particular, and having been doing inking for a while, it's kind of, to me, it's almost like a second nature thing. So I had to really think about it, and I had to think, because I just kind of have at it, and for me, when you start to learn how to draw, and you start to learn form and shape and things like that, really anything, whether it's fur or scales or whatever, it's just sort of a texture that you map onto whatever drawing it is. Once you know what that form is, you know how the light falls on it and everything. It's similar. I mean, it's a little different in that the texture is different, but it all follows a lot of those same rules. And so that's some of the things that I want to go over before I even start with this, because it's those basics. And once you know those basics, I think it's going to help you out no matter what texture you're doing. So one of those basics is the light source. So you want to know exactly where the light falls, and you can kind of see with the pencil. So here, I'm just saying my light source is coming from up here, so you can see where, you don't want to, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to draw every single strand of fur. You want to leave some of that, because when the light hits it, you've just got these large areas where you don't even see fur. It's there, but you don't really see it because the light's hitting it so hard. Up here in the top of the brow, on the top of the head, a little bit down here on the shoulders, you see less. Anything where the light is going to hit, and again, you have to sort of know your form. So I know that there's going to be a big shoulder muscle here, and I know it's going to be rounded, and I kind of know that that's where the light's going to kind of hit off of that. So I'm just showing a little bit here. Also the chest, where the chest kind of sticks out. I don't have as much there. Plus, you also want to know things like how fur grows and growth patterns. If you look at, now, a Wolfman, he's pretty much covered with fur, but that still doesn't mean he might not have less fur, say, around his chest or his chin or whatever, similar to, an average person. Average, at least mostly males have body hair, and you can kind of see where that is more prevalent. And you know, there's certain places, especially if you're wearing clothing, where, you know, I say on like your calf, it might have a little friction, so you're not going to see. You might have a little less hair there. So keep that stuff in mind when you're approaching inking fur. But so we start off knowing what our light source is. So we're going to start with a simple shape, but it's all based on the shape. And like I said, once you know what that shape is, then you can figure everything out from there. So I'm going to start with sort of just a circular shape. I don't even know if I'm going to bother drawing it in. Well, here I'm going to get a little pencil just so I can block it out. Here's a little pencil. So I'll draw some little circular shapes, and these aren't just circles, but these are going to be spheres. So that's the one thing you want to think about when you're doing your illustration, is think of things as not flat shapes, but as 3D shapes. So I'm just going to say my light source, we're going to put a little sun here. My light source is coming from up in this direction here. In addition to the light source, you also want to have an idea of what the texture of the fur is. And that can be, you know, if it's a long fur, or if it's shorter fur, if it's a little curly, straight, if it's coarse, if it's thin or gossamer. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to start with one that's just a real thin fur, almost maybe kind of like a real light peach fuzz or whatever. So we know our light is hitting our sphere here, so I'm not going to do anything right here where the light hits. I'm going to just start, and I'm going to start kind of thin up in here, and just short little blasts of fur, and I'm just going to kind of go around here. And keep in mind the way the fur goes. It's not going to be all straight in the same direction. Some little hairs are going to go a little over here, but it's going to be light towards the top, and as we get down, you know, and I'm kind of curving my pen in different directions as I go, but this is all really thin fur right here. And then I'm going to start gradually, I'm going to start getting darker as I go here. And then, because it's coming a little bit from this side, it's going to be also a little darker here. But these are still very, very short strokes that I'm doing here. We don't want this to be like super long fur. And the other thing, and I'll show this in another example, you kind of want to know where the fur is growing from. Right now I'm just kind of imagining it's kind of emanating from the same place that the light source is, and that doesn't always have to be the case. It is with this, but so as you can see, as I get further down, I still want to keep, you know, these strokes relatively short. And you can kind of see as it are getting darker as we go on there. Now we're going to do sort of the same thing, same light source. This fur is going to be a little longer, so it's going to be a little more shaggy, but still the same sort of with the light source. But you can kind of see how I'm sort of rotating the direction of where I'm pulling my pen, and I'm kind of curving it a little bit. And you know, it can be even, if it's more of a curly type fur, it can kind of curve even more, kind of back and forth or whatever. This is a little more straight, and you know, since it is long, I mean, we might even see, you know, part of it kind of hanging down over the side, whereas this is going to kind of, just because it's shorter, it's going to kind of curve right along with that, where that sphere is. This is gonna hang off a little more. And again, we're just gonna get darker here. Now this is just, now we're seeing fur pretty much everywhere here, but keep in mind, if this is a show, I'm keeping the, you know, I'm talking about drawing spheres, just like I talked about the shoulder. So imagine that's just part of the shoulder, whereas if we extended this, if this is like an actual arm, maybe that's a shoulder, we'll continue this whole thing as another shape, and then there's going to be another sort of light source that's going to hit, and then, you know, we just build shapes on top of shapes, if you can imagine that. All right. So also, like I said, you want to understand what the direction how the fur is growing, because fur doesn't. I mean, it usually starts at a certain point, and it kind of continues from there. So I'm just going to draw. This is sort of this is going to be our rudimentary Wolfman here. You know, he's got our nose and everything here. Got our eyes. All right. So he's going to have a brow here, but we're going to have the fur start right here, right by his nose. So where the brow is, we're going to kind of go up here. Imagine that fur is kind of coming now. Everything's coming from this point right here. Can you see that? Am I covering it? All right, and then up here we'll have a little more, and then just imagine, you know, the top of the head right here, but then it's also going to come out through here. Again, we're starting at this point right here, and then it can the hair can kind of pull up. Yeah, imagine he's sort of got like almost like a mustache. I mean, he's covered in fur, so I guess it wouldn't be like a mustache or a beard, but it kind of takes the same shape where it's kind of coming from here. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the mouth, you know, there's sort of a stopping point, but it's still kind of coming from, you know, then the hair is going to start coming from here, but it's still all kind of going up towards that direction. And then, you know, as we come down, as this becomes more like in shadow, it's going to get a little thicker here. But imagine each one of these sections is kind of a different shape. Everything is made up of shapes. And that's the one thing, like I said, once you know that, the texture is just kind of, it is what it is. I mean, we could just as easily make this like scales or whatever, but once we kind of see these different shapes in here, and you're just concentrating on these individual shapes instead of the whole thing, and otherwise it's just going to look sort of like a mess. So now that you see that, you know, we've kind of got the idea of the flow and the direction of the fur. So let's get started. We're going to start with some different, I'm going to switch my pens. So I've got a couple different pens here, brush pens, that I'm going to start off with. This one is running a little low on ink. It is refillable, but I didn't refill it yet because I want to show the difference between a bride brush technique, which works really good for fur, and more of just a wet brush. And hopefully this one's wet enough. Hopefully it's got enough ink left in it. But again, looking at the shape, I'm starting again from, I'm figuring the hair is going to start growing from the nose, so you can kind of see how we go in here. So this is my wet brush. I'm just going to, and I'm imagining he's got some pretty thick fur. He's not, this isn't like the peach fuzz I was illustrating earlier. So we just want to know that the direction that fur is going, and also the different shapes. I mean, we're looking at the you know, the value of the shape underneath, and we want to see like these, and it's just, we want to recognize the masses of fur. So there's going to be little clumps like this one area right here that I'm focusing right now. We know that it's three-dimensional, so it's kind of curved here. So on the bottom, we're going to see more. On the top, we're not going to see as much, but we're also going to see. But it is going to kind of. We're going to see. It's going to look like there's more fur up here towards the top because we're getting the shadow where the head kind of curves into the brow. If you can see that, so we're going to see that. So it's these shapes coming together. So it really helps to look at everything as individual shapes, all these different parts coming together. And a lot of time, less is more. If we just did the whole thing, like I said, we just did the whole thing, you know, illustrated every single strand, it's going to be too much, and there's not going to be any value to it. I mean, it's all going to be the same color, you know, the same amount of ink in the same places. So here you can kind of see what I'm doing, and then we can kind of go in here. This area isn't actually fur, this is part of his eye, but we'll go ahead and show that. and it's similar, but this isn't, you know, I guess if this was fur here, it would still kind of curve out this way. So I'm just starting at where the fur is emanating from, and I'm just pulling it out right there. All right, so we can see that. And now I'm going to switch over here a little bit, and I'll go back in and fill some of this up. But like I said, this pen is running a little low on ink, but that's not always a bad thing because we can get some cool texture. Let's see if this is a little drier. You can kind of see how you see how it sort of splits a little bit? See that? Hopefully you're getting that. But with fur, that dry technique, it's almost like it seems like you get a little more gray in there. And you can see how it's just not as, see how tight that is? And that looks really cool, but it also looks cool when you get this really, you know, kind of rough and raw dry brush technique, which works really good with fur. You can kind of see, again, see these tufts of fur? See how it's the amount of ink that I'm laying down that's sort of making those shapes come alive. So you don't want to get carried away drawing too much. I mean, your eye will fill in the, you know, where that light source hits, but you can see where these different tufts are coming in, because it's just not one big, like, I imagine when you, like, if you go to a fabric store and you buy one of those fake furs, and if you were just to wrap it around a ball or something, it's just kind of looks like one continuous thing until you start to look at how the light hits it and everything. Whereas this, it's all growing naturally. So underneath the chin here, it's going to be a little darker. But really, it's just kind of fun just to play around with this, and I'm actually liking this dry brush technique quite a bit. But since this is an illustration where I'm showing off a number of different techniques, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be using a little bit of both. So maybe maybe down here, it makes more sense to have a little more dry brush, and then here where it's a little around the face, keep it a little tighter. But now I can kind of, it just looks, it's starting to look a little random. So I want to make sure that in this case, I do want to have a little more black in here, because you do want some spaces where we have a lot of that in shadows. Now where this kind of curves up, I'm going to kind of keep that white just to show where that's curving up. But I do want some areas that are a little more in shadow. Otherwise, you just don't want to keep it too uniform. Like if there's, it's all the you know, the value that you're putting in here. So if you've got bright, and then you've got dark, and you got bright, and you got dark, it's just gonna, it's not gonna look right. So I definitely want to have more blacks in here, and then maybe in here. So I am going to continue to kind of fill this guy in using both the wet and dry brushes, and just talk a little more about the illustration along the way. But in order to make this not a super long video, I'm going to start to speed up this process. I'm going to continue to ink this Wolfman character, and some of the other things you want to think about, like I mentioned, definitely like the type of fur that whatever creature you're doing has. For instance, this character has more sort of you know, a long, you know, longer fur. I'm thinking it's probably you know, somewhat thinner, not like say like Chewbacca, where I would imagine Chewbacca, I know the costume was done like out of yak fur, so it's kind of like a real coarse, heavy fur, whereas, I don't know, for me, like werewolves in movies I've seen, it's kind of always funny when they have the werewolf where it's kind of like that Werewolf of London type thing from that Warren Zevon song, where it's, you know, it's talking about how his hair is perfect and everything, and it's like if he wanted to, he could kind of style it and everything. So with that, I'm thinking more of a thinner type fur. So yeah, that's something to think about. But if I was doing more of a creature, like I said, at Chewbacca, where it's like,
his hair is, you know, it's and it's not only like, I think his hair has a number of different colors and it's got browns and blacks and everything. So another thing you want to think about is the color. So with this character, I'm thinking his fur, with most, you know, most werewolves from the movies and things that you know, at least the Wolfman, he's got more of like a medium brown fur. But if you're doing a creature like an abominable snowman where it's white fur, then you're going to want to take that into consideration. So you're not going to have as many dark shadows and dark areas. That's gonna be, I mean, you're still, you know, you're still gonna have some shadows and everything, even though it's a white fur. I mean, it's not gonna be just a solid, you know, white mass, because you have to you know, show some of that value and everything in there. But just fewer of that if you're doing more of a lighter, you know, a lighter fur type creature. Conversely, if you want to do, say if he was going to have like black fur, I mean, you're going to double up on those blacks. So those are things you want to think about. You want to think about the texture of the fur. Is it coarse? Is it long? Is it short? Is it thin? Medium? Whatever. Or, like I said, it could be curly. Like if you're doing, say if you're doing a werewolf and he's more, you know, because they're all kind of based on wolves or whatever. But like also you look at dogs, like a poodle has more of a curly little tight, like these knotty type little, you know, fluffy, you know, it could be, or if you, yeah, and you could do, yeah, might be a neat take on a werewolf or something else if it was kind of more of a fluffy version, or, you know, you could do anything. I mean, it's just like, so it really depends. There's so many different styles of fur, so that's something you want to think about, and that all has to do with how you know, when you're pulling your ink brush around, you curl it up, do you go straight? So, and again, the color and everything, how the light falls on the fur. So yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to think about, and it's just little alterations that you do depending on some of this stuff too. But going back to, like I was saying about Chewbacca, it doesn't have to be one solid, like I think, you know, with the Wolfman or with I'm trying to think of a character who has darker, like black fur, maybe like a black bear. Like I'm trying to think, there was an old, I don't know how many guys are old enough to remember the old $6 Million Man show, but there was a Sasquatch character. He was a bionic Sasquatch, and he had, from what I remember, at least I had the toy, and he had like real dark fur, and it was a little more, it seemed a little shorter, a little more curly, but like, so yeah, whether it's, you know, you got black fur, brown fur, white fur, whatever the case is, think about that when you're doing your fur, the shape, all that stuff, and just again, always be in mind where that the growth of the fur, where it's coming from. Find that one point, you know, and start off with that. Usually I like to start around the head, it seems, and it's kind of, everything kind of goes back from there, and it just kind of flows, and then it's, you know, it's going to have those areas, those clumps of fur, those you know, masses of fur and everything. So pay attention to that, and yeah, I think that's about as much as I think I'm going to go into on this particular video. But yeah, we're gonna do other videos on different textures and things like that, yeah, just here again experimenting with the different, you know, going back to around the face, doing more of a wetter brush versus the drier brush. Typically, I would do one or the other in an illustration. I probably wouldn't switch back and forth, but with this one, again, I'm just kind of experimenting a little between the wet and dry brush and see how each one works, just to give you an idea what that looks like. And there's no right way, no wrong way. Some people prefer that wet look, some people prefer a more dry look. But I would, in addition, I would turn your head to some inkers that I really like, that are really good, who've done some other werewolf characters and stuff. Look at an artist that does really well with different textures. Is Art Adams. Look at a lot of his ink stuff. You can see how he handles different textures, and he's done some different, like, characters like from the Marvel universe that have fur and stuff. There's actually a character called Sasquatch in the Marvel universe that I don't know if he's done any. I know he's done like Wolfman because he's done stuff for New Mutants and things like that. But definitely check out a lot of the stuff that Art Adams does. Another one you want to look at, especially this time of year for some creepy type stuff, is Bernie Wrightson, and he kind of switches. You can see some of his rougher stuff. He's got more of a bride dress effect, and then he's got like his Frankenstein graphic novel. Just probably some of the most amazing illustrations I've seen, and just the way he handles value with that, the light and the shade. That, I mean, if you haven't seen that stuff, definitely check that out. Yeah, those are two of my favorites when it comes to inking and texture and everything. So take a look at those, and then. And yeah, so I'm gonna wrap this guy up, and hopefully this was helpful.
Okay, so those are just a few tips and tools that you can use when rendering fur in ink. There's a lot of practical applications like this. Of course, many characters have fur, and characters that you want to create that are your own original. Play around with this, see how it works. I'm anxious to hear, what you guys come up with. I also want to know what other techniques might you be interested in me going over. I'm gonna continue doing some more of these in Inktober, so if there's other textures you want to learn or any kind of inking techniques, let me know in the comments section. Other than that, I will see you guys later. That is all.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.